He saw a mother living in her car, broken, scared, and alone. But what Keanu Reeves did next changed everything, not just for her, but for the world watching. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe compassion still exists, hit that subscribe button. We've got more powerful stories coming tomorrow. The wind was sharp that night, a cold that wrapped around the bones and stayed there. Keanu Reeves walked out of the supermarket, 2 bags in hand, the weight of them lighter than the heaviness he suddenly felt in his chest. The parking lot was mostly empty, lit only by tired yellow lights that buzzed faintly in the quiet. His footsteps were slow, unhurried, his hoodie pulled low over his face to keep away the late-night chill. He liked these moments. The normal ones. Grocery shopping, parking lots, checkout lines. After months of chaotic filming schedules and red carpets that never felt real, this was his way of touching the world again. A man blending in with the background, just another tired face under a hoodie. But that night, something tugged at the edge of his awareness. There, tucked away in the farthest corner of the parking lot, sat an old car, the kind that looked like it had seen better decades. The windows were fogged over. Clothes hung inside, swaying lightly with the breeze from a small crack in the window. And then he saw her. A woman, pushing shopping carts back into a line near the entrance. Her coat was far too thin for the weather. Her movements were robotic, like someone going through motions just to keep moving. Her eyes scanned the area, but never met anyone else's. Not really. She was trying to stay invisible. Keanu slowed down, instinctively watching. She kept glancing toward that old car. At first, it didn't register. But then it did. That's her home, he thought. That car. A quiet alarm rang in his chest. The thought of someone, especially a mother, trying to survive in this biting cold, with a child no less, in a broken-down car under parking lot lights, it did something to him. A feeling he couldn't shake. He stopped walking. Something pulled at him. He stood there for a moment longer before gently changing course, heading toward her without really deciding to. When he got close enough, he spoke, softly, not to startle her. "Hi." She froze mid-motion. The cart she was holding came to a halt. Her eyes darted to him, then away. Fast. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Is there any way I can help?" She tensed, the distrust immediate. "I'm fine," she said. Cold. Clipped. Not hostile, but guarded. Like someone who'd learned to protect herself, even from kindness. Keanu nodded slowly, not pushing. "All right. I get it. If you need anything, I'm around." She didn't say another word. Just turned and walked briskly toward the old car. Keanu watched her open the door. Inside, barely visible through the foggy window, was a small figure, a baby, bundled in mismatched blankets. Just a faint silhouette shifting in her arms. He stood there frozen. The baby stirred and made a soft, muffled cry that cut through the silence like a whisper for help. He couldn't walk away. He tried. Got into his own car, sat there, gripping the wheel. But her image, her worn coat, her hunched shoulders, that child, it clung to him. He didn't sleep that night. And the next morning, Keanu Reeves came back. The morning air was crisp again, but with the edge of daylight, the parking lot didn't feel as still. A few birds chirped high up in the electrical wires, and a truck rumbled by, its engine groaning into the silence. Keanu parked his car in the same spot and sat quietly, scanning the lot. The old car was still there. Same foggy windows. Same faded paint. Same feeling in his chest. He watched as the woman emerged from the car with a plastic bag, her shoulders hunched against the morning cold. She moved like someone who hadn't slept, though sleep might have happened, just not rest. In her arms, the child was wrapped tightly, silent but clearly there. Life had become motion for her. Just survival. Keanu looked at the passenger seat beside him. He had brought 2 things from home, a bottle of clean mineral water and a brand new blanket, still in its original wrapping. Simple things. Small things. But maybe, right now, everything. He stepped out and walked over slowly, making sure not to look like a threat. He didn't knock on the car window. He didn't call out. Instead, he placed the items carefully on the hood of her car, positioned clearly where she could see them. No note. No explanation. Just quiet help. Then he walked back to his car and sat inside. A few minutes passed. The woman emerged again, slowly this time. She looked around, cautious, like she was expecting someone to confront her or accuse her. Her eyes landed on the bottle and blanket. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, finally, she reached for them. Her hands trembled just slightly as she picked them up. He could see her lips moving. Maybe she said thank you. Maybe she prayed. Maybe it was just breath. He wasn't close enough to hear, and that was okay. She tucked the items inside the car and gently closed the door. Keanu exhaled. It was something. But as he drove away that morning, a part of him felt unsettled. The feeling that lingered wasn't satisfaction. It was frustration. He'd helped, yes, but it didn't feel like enough. He thought about her all day. The exhaustion in her face. The way her eyes shifted as if they'd forgotten what trust looked like. He didn't even know her name, but her silence echoed in his head. The next day, he came back again. This time, he waited longer. He watched from a distance, staying near his car. She was pushing carts again, her motion slower, her breath visible in the morning air. When she was near her car, he approached, carefully, just like before. "Hi," he said gently. She turned, startled, clutching the strap of the baby bag tighter across her chest. "I'm the guy who left the water in the blanket. I hope it didn't make you uncomfortable." She looked at him differently this time. Same guardedness, but now with something else underneath it. Curiosity, maybe. "You?" she asked, her voice almost accusing. He nodded. I saw you. That's all. Thought you could use it." She didn't reply right away. Then, quietly, "Thank you for that." He smiled, stepping back slightly, giving her space. "I just want to help. If that's okay. And if not, that's okay too. But sometimes, accepting help isn't weakness. It's strength." She didn't answer. But he saw it. The shift. The way her shoulders softened ever so slightly. The way her eyes didn't immediately drop. It was progress. As he was about to return to his car, a muffled cry came from inside hers. The baby stirred. The woman turned quickly and opened the door, scooping the child up in her arms and gently rocking him. She looked tense, trying to soothe him while blocking Keanu's view. He hesitated for just a moment, then asked, "Do you need anything? Formula? Diapers?" She looked at him again. This time, not as a stranger. Not entirely. Her voice broke softly. I need milk." That was all it took. "Wait here," Keanu said. He didn't ask for permission. He just walked. 10 minutes later, he returned with a small bag, powdered baby formula, diapers, wipes. All fresh. All new. She took the bag wordlessly, but with hands that shook. She clutched it like it was treasure. Then, barely audible, she whispered, "Thank you." Keanu gave her a nod and a gentle smile. "I'll be around," he said, before turning away. She didn't stop him. But she watched him leave. And that meant everything. The next day, Keanu returned, not just out of concern, but because he couldn't stay away. There was something about that woman, about her silence, her resilience, her quiet fear that stirred something deeply personal in him. As he parked a few rows down, he saw her again, pushing carts like before. She didn't see him yet. She was focused, her eyes down, but her steps were slower today, like fatigue had finally caught up to her body. The kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. Keanu waited until she neared the car, then approached once more, not suddenly, not loudly. Just enough to let her see him coming. "Hi," he said, like a familiar rhythm. She looked up, surprised. But this time, she didn't shrink back. "You came back," she said, voice quieter than the breeze curling through the lot. He offered a small smile. "I said I'd be around." She studied him for a moment, eyes scanning his face as if trying to decode the reason behind his presence. "I hope I didn't pressure you yesterday." She shook her head slowly. "No. It was kind of you." Keanu felt a small warmth in his chest. The smallest shift, but real. He gestured toward the curb near her car. "Mind if I sit?" She hesitated. But then, she nodded. Keanu sat down slowly, arms resting on his knees, giving her the space she still clearly needed. The air was quiet between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of something being built, slowly, carefully. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said gently. "Not unless you want to. But can I ask your name?" The woman looked down, then back at him. After a moment, she whispered, "Emily." Keanu nodded. "Nice to meet you, Emily." He glanced at the bundled child in her arms. "And him?" She hesitated, then looked down at her baby with soft eyes. "Oliver." "Oliver," Keanu repeated with a small smile. "That's a strong name." Emily's lips twitched, a shadow of a smile, maybe. Or maybe just a flicker of comfort. Keanu leaned back slightly. "You know, I've had hard times too," he said, voice low and honest. "I've lost people who were my world. Days when getting out of bed felt impossible." Emily didn't speak, but her eyes didn't leave him. "I didn't get through it alone," he continued. "I had help. People who didn't know me anything but still cared. Sometimes accepting help is how we survive." She looked down, adjusting Oliver in her arms. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "Sometimes it feels like I'm alone in the world. Like no one sees me. No one cares." Keanu shook his head gently. "I care," he said simply. "And I don't say that lightly." She glanced at him, and in that moment, something cracked, not broken, but opened. A tiny window where trust could maybe begin to grow. That night, after Emily fell asleep in her car, Keanu returned. He moved quietly, bags in hand. Inside were baby essentials, hygiene items, soft toys. Things chosen with care. He placed them beside the driver's door, then pulled out a small note he had written earlier. He tucked it gently under the blanket. No names. No pressure. Just a message. "You're not alone. We're in this together." He stepped back, looked at the quiet car with its fogged windows, and exhaled into the cold night. Then he left. The next morning, Emily stirred. Her back ached. Her neck was stiff. But Oliver was warm, still asleep on her chest. That alone felt like a miracle. When she opened the door and saw the bags, her heart stuttered. She froze, unsure what to think, what to feel. She picked up one of the toys, a soft elephant, small enough for Oliver's tiny hands, and stared at it like it didn't belong in her world. Like maybe this was a dream. Then she found the note. Her hand trembled as she read it. And for the first time in a very long time, Emily cried, not out of fear, or pain, or despair, but because she felt seen. That afternoon, when Keanu pulled into the parking lot, he didn't even get out of the car before she stepped out of hers. She walked to him, holding the bag from last night. "Thank you," she said, her voice firm but full of emotion. "This means a lot." Keanu nodded, stepping out to meet her halfway. "I'm glad it helped." She looked down, then back up. Her expression had changed, still cautious, but less guarded. There was something new there now. Something resembling hope. "I don't usually talk about this," she began, then stopped herself. Took a breath. "But I lost everything. My husband. My home. My life." Keanu's expression didn't change, still soft, still present. And what happened after, she added, it's hard to even say out loud. He didn't move. Just gave her his silence. His listening. You don't have to rush, he said gently. I'll be here. Whenever you're ready. Emily nodded, swallowing hard. And for the first time in months, she felt like someone was willing to hear her. Really hear her. The wind rustled softly through the parking lot trees as Emily leaned back against her car, Oliver cradled in her arms. Her eyes, tired but open, stayed locked on Keanu as if she were balancing on the edge of a decision, one she'd resisted for too long. Then, with a breath that seemed to pull something out of her soul, she began. It all started when he died, she said, voice thin and fragile. My husband. Liam. Keanu nodded but said nothing, allowing her space. He was driving home from work. Just a regular night. Nothing unusual. The weather was fine. Traffic was light. But then, she faltered, her grip tightening on Oliver. Her eyes filled with water but didn't spill. There was a drunk driver. Ran a red light. Hit him full speed. The police told me he died instantly. No pain. Just gone. She stopped. The wind filled the silence. I remember opening the door and seeing the officer standing there. I knew. Even before he spoke. The world shifted. Like someone had ripped the floor out from under me. Keanu listened intently, his posture calm but attentive, every inch of him radiating patience. After that, she continued, her voice lower now, everything unraveled. The life insurance barely covered funeral costs. Bills stacked up. I was drowning in grief, and then Liam's parents, they said I wasn't fit to care for Oliver. She let out a bitter, quiet laugh. They said I was unstable. That I wasn't thinking clearly. Maybe they were right. I couldn't sleep. I cried constantly. But I never once stopped caring for him. Keanu's jaw tightened slightly. They filed for custody. Took me to court. And I couldn't afford a decent lawyer. I was alone. No job. No support. Just me and Oliver. Her eyes flicked down to the baby in her arms. So one night, I packed everything I could into my car, took whatever cash I had, and drove. No map. No plan. Just away. Keanu finally spoke, softly. That must have taken courage. Emily shrugged. It didn't feel like courage. It felt like desperation. She looked into the distance. Her voice dropped even more. I ended up in a new town. Got a job at a little cafe. Worked nights. Slept during Oliver's naps. Started saving. Thought maybe, just maybe, I'd make it. A pause. But then this customer started harassing me. Creepy comments. Too close. One day I snapped. Told him off. Loudly. The manager didn't care why. He just fired me. Keanu exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. I couldn't pay rent. Got evicted. Moved into the car. It wasn't supposed to last this long. I thought I'd find something. Anything. Her voice cracked. But no one wants to hire a single mom with no address and a baby always in tow. She wiped her cheek quickly, pretending there weren't tears. I've been pushing carts here for almost 2 weeks. The manager turns a blind eye. I don't even get paid. Just lets me use the store restroom when it's empty. She looked up at Keanu again. So, yeah, we live here now. In this car. Me and Oliver. I know it's not safe. I know he deserves more. But I've tried everything. Keanu leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. Emily, he said, his voice low, almost reverent, you've done more than most people would in your situation. You didn't give up. You fought for your son. You still are. She laughed bitterly. Doesn't feel like fighting. Feels like falling. Keanu didn't smile. Didn't try to console with empty words. You're not falling, he said firmly. You're standing in a storm with no umbrella and still holding your child tight. That's strength. Emily looked away, her lips pressed together. After a moment, she whispered, "What do I do now?" Keanu looked her dead in the eyes. "We figure it out. Together." She blinked. "Why? Why would you even care?" He stood, walking to his car without answering. Moments later, he returned holding a small envelope. Inside was a key. A motel. One night. Clean bed. Hot shower. You and Oliver can rest. Tomorrow, we talk about the next step. Her body stiffened. "I can't take that." "You're not taking charity. You're accepting a place to breathe." She didn't move. Keanu added, "Please, Emily. Let me do this one thing." Silence. Then she reached out and took the key. That night, Emily opened the door to the small motel room. It wasn't grand, faded wallpaper, buzzing heater, a single queen bed, but it was warm. She laid Oliver gently on the bed and covered him in the new blanket. The baby stirred, then sighed in his sleep. Emily sat at the edge of the mattress, the softness foreign to her body. And she cried. Not quietly. Not hiding. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel it all. Fear. Shame. Exhaustion. And under it, just a flicker. Hope. On the nightstand lay Keanu's note from before, folded gently next to the motel key. "You're not alone. We're in this together." The next morning, the motel room was filled with quiet. A soft yellow glow from the bedside lamp painted the walls in warmth. Oliver slept soundly, tucked into a real bed, not the stiff back seat of a freezing car. Emily sat in the corner chair, arms wrapped around her knees, watching him. She hadn't slept much. Her body was rested, but her mind couldn't stop spinning. Why was he doing this? What did he want? Who just helps like this? The knock at the door came gently. She opened it cautiously. Keanu stood there, dressed simply in jeans and a plain jacket, holding a couple of grocery bags. "Hey," he said, offering the smallest smile. "I brought something for breakfast." Emily stepped aside, wordless. Inside the bags, cereal, fruit, juice, baby food, and a few essentials, shampoo, toothpaste, even a stuffed bear. She looked at the items like they might vanish if she touched them. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice dry. Keanu shook his head. "Don't. Just eat something." While Oliver napped, they sat across from each other at the small table in the motel room. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, dancing across their quiet conversation. "There's something I want to talk to you about," Keanu began. Emily tensed slightly. "It's not charity," he added quickly. "I've been making some calls. Reaching out to places I trust. There's a community center not far from here. They help people get back on their feet, housing, childcare, job search." She looked uncertain, guarded. "I spoke to the director," he continued. "They're expecting you. There's a private room with a crib for Oliver. Staff you can talk to. And they won't ask questions you're not ready to answer." Emily blinked, absorbing the words. "And if you're open to it," he added gently, "I know a few people looking to hire part-time help. Offices, front desks, low pressure. Flexible hours." She looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. Her eyes said it all, people don't just offer these things. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Keanu paused, then answered quietly. "Because I can. Because I've seen too many people fall and no one catch them. And because I know what it feels like to lose everything and still have to wake up." Emily's lips parted slightly. She wanted to argue. To reject it. But she couldn't. Not anymore. "Will you come see it?" he asked. Just walk through. No pressure. She nodded. Later that day, they arrived at the community center. It was simple, white walls, clean halls, soft lighting, but the energy was warm. A place built not just for housing but for healing. The director welcomed her with calm, understanding eyes. A woman who didn't speak down to her. Who didn't ask why she was there or how she got there. Just, "We're glad you're here." Emily followed as they showed her a small room. A twin bed. A crib with fresh sheets. A rocking chair. Her knees almost gave out. Oliver reached for the mobile above the crib, his tiny fingers waving at the dangling stars. "I don't know how to express this," Emily murmured, her voice cracking. "You don't have to," Keanu said. "Just breathe." She turned to him, her voice barely audible. "You saved us." "No," Keanu said. "You saved yourself. I just opened a door." Over the next few days, things began to change. Slowly. Gently. Emily attended sessions with a counselor. She applied for a part-time receptionist job at a local clinic. And she got it. Keanu drove her there on her first day. As they pulled up outside the building, she sat in the passenger seat, wringing her hands. "You're going to do great," he said. "What if I fail?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "Then we try again," he replied. "That's what people do." Emily walked into the clinic wearing second-hand slacks and a blouse from the donation closet. Her shoulders were still slouched, but she smiled when someone greeted her. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a ghost walking through the world. She felt human again. That evening, Keanu came by to see how her first shift went. She talked. He listened. Her words flowed easier now. She told him about her in-laws. How they'd asked for a supervised visit with Oliver. "I don't know if I should let them," she admitted. Keanu nodded. "Only you can decide that. But the fact that you're thinking about it, that means you're healing." Emily glanced at Oliver, who was now crawling across the small carpet of her community center room. "I'm trying," she said. "You're doing more than that," Keanu replied. "You're rising." 1 week later, they sat together at a small cafe, sipping lukewarm coffee. Oliver babbled in a high chair beside them. Emily looked at Keanu across the table. "I want you to know, one day, I'm going to pay this forward." Keanu smiled, eyes soft. "You already are." She blinked. "Every time you hold your son. Every time you show up. Every time you fight back against everything that tried to break you. That's repayment." Emily's smile wavered with emotion. "I want to help others one day. The way you helped me." Keanu nodded. "That's the best way to thank me." They sat in silence, warm sunlight catching the edges of their faces. A mother. A child. A stranger who became a lifeline. And a future slowly, quietly unfolding. Weeks passed. Not in a blur, but with small, deliberate steps. The community center became a sanctuary for Emily and Oliver, a quiet space where healing didn't require explanation. The walls were lined with muted artwork, the smell of warm soup often drifting through the corridors, and the sound of children echoing softly through the common areas. Each morning, Emily woke up in her room, pulled back the thin curtains, and let the sunlight touch Oliver's cheeks before she changed him and got ready for work. Work. It still felt strange to call it that. She hadn't realized how deeply the absence of purpose had sunk into her skin, until the first day she was given a schedule, a name tag, and a simple desk with a phone. Her coworkers were kind, quiet, and respectful. They didn't ask personal questions. They gave her space to breathe. One woman even brought her a coffee on her second day, saying, "Just in case it's one of those mornings." Emily almost cried at the gesture. Each night, she returned to the center tired, but it was a good kind of tired. Earned. Deserved. Oliver smiled more now. He started crawling faster, babbling louder. His little feet patted the vinyl floor as he chased after a soft red ball someone had donated. Emily had started laughing again. One evening, Keanu stopped by with a paper bag of groceries and a small potted plant. "For your room," he said, placing it gently on the windowsill. Emily looked at it, a tiny green sprout in a ceramic pot. "What is it?" "A fern," he smiled. "They survive in all kinds of conditions. But give them light, and they thrive." She said nothing, but her fingers ran gently over the leaves. A few days later, Emily made a decision she hadn't thought she'd be ready for. She contacted Liam's parents. Not to beg. Not to apologize. But to tell them Oliver was safe, cared for, and that if they wanted to be part of his life, it would be on her terms. Keanu sat across from her in the center's courtyard when she told him. "That's huge," he said softly. Emily nodded. "I was scared. But I want Oliver to know where he came from. And I want to show them. I'm not who they thought I was." Keanu's gaze didn't flinch. "You don't have to prove anything, Emily. But I admire you for it." She gave him a look of quiet strength. "I'm tired of running." And she meant it. One Saturday, Emily invited Keanu to the local park where she'd started taking Oliver in the mornings. It was simple, just a swing set, a patch of grass, and a few trees, but to them, it was everything. Keanu showed up in sunglasses and a baseball cap, blending in like a local. He pushed Oliver gently on the swing while Emily sat nearby, watching the two of them with a smile she hadn't known she could wear again. "Have you ever thought about becoming a dad?" she asked, out of nowhere. Keanu looked at Oliver, then at her. "More times than I can count," he admitted. Emily studied his face, the sadness behind the calm. She didn't ask questions. Didn't dig. But in that moment, she understood something about him she hadn't before. This wasn't about saving her. This was about healing both of them. That night, Emily journaled for the first time in months. She wrote down everything, how she felt, what she feared, what she hoped for. She ended the page with a simple line. "Maybe I'm not just surviving anymore. Maybe I'm becoming." 2 weeks later, she received her first paycheck. It wasn't much. But it was hers. She bought a soft winter jacket for Oliver, a new pair of shoes for herself, and a small, used storybook about stars and wishes. That evening, she read it to Oliver while he giggled and grabbed at the pages. Keanu sat on a nearby bench, watching with a quiet smile. "You're building a life," he said when she finished. Emily turned the book over in her hands. "With your help." "No," he replied gently. "With your courage." One afternoon, as they sat by the community center window, Emily turned to Keanu and asked, "Do you ever think about how random this all was? Like, what if you hadn't gone to that store that night?" Keanu looked out at the street. "I don't think it was random." "Why not?" He thought for a moment. "Because I think some people are meant to collide. Not by chance. But by something bigger." Emily nodded slowly, letting the silence hold the truth between them. Later that evening, she placed the potted fern from her windowsill into a small patch of soil just outside the community center's garden space. She pressed the dirt gently around it and whispered, "Grow." Behind her, Keanu stood quietly, hands in his pockets, watching her reclaim more than just ground. She was reclaiming herself. Spring crept in without warning. The trees outside the community center began to bloom, thin green buds pushing through the branches like quiet declarations of survival. The air carried a different weight now, not heavy with uncertainty, but lighter, touched by possibility. Emily's room had changed too. The crib had been replaced with a toddler bed. Her clothes now hung on hangers, not folded in plastic bags. A corkboard on the wall displayed a schedule, a childcare calendar, a job flyer, and a handwritten note Keanu had left weeks ago. "You're not alone. We're in this together." She read it often. Not because she needed to remind herself he was there, but because it reminded her of how far she'd come. One afternoon, Keanu arrived at the center to visit. But this time, Emily wasn't there. The staff member at the front smiled and said, "She's at work. Full shift today." Keanu smiled too, a different kind of pride warming his chest. He didn't leave. Instead, he waited in the small lounge, chatting with a few of the volunteers, offering to help carry boxes of donations from the storage room. No one treated him like a celebrity. Here, he was just a man trying to do something kind. When Emily returned that evening, her eyes lit up when she saw him. "You waited?" she asked, surprised. He nodded. "I figured we could take a walk. If you're not too tired." "I'm exhausted," she said, laughing. "But yes." They walked through a nearby trail path as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. "You seem lighter," Keanu said. "I feel lighter," she replied. "I didn't know how heavy survival was until it wasn't the only thing I was doing anymore." He glanced at her. "And now?" She stopped walking and looked up at the sky. "Now I'm living." A week later, Emily received news from the center staff. There was a small apartment opening nearby, subsidized, safe, clean, and walking distance from the clinic where she worked. It was a chance. A place of her own. That evening, she told Keanu about it over dinner. He didn't say much at first. Just smiled. "You're ready," he said. "I think so," she replied. "Are you scared?" She nodded. "Good," he said. "That means it matters." She looked at him for a long time. "Will you still visit?" He nodded once. "Always." The day Emily moved into the apartment, she stood at the doorway with a single suitcase and Oliver in her arms. The apartment wasn't big, just one bedroom, a small kitchen, a bathroom, and a living area with sun that poured through the window, but to her, it was everything. Keanu helped carry the few things she had into the space, placing them carefully on the floor. When they finished, they both stood in the center of the empty room, silent. "This is the first place that's mine," she whispered. Keanu looked around and nodded. "It feels like a beginning." Emily decorated slowly. A second-hand bookshelf. A blue rug she found at a thrift store. She framed one of Oliver's doodles and hung it above the couch. But the first thing she unpacked was the potted fern. The one Keanu gave her. It went on the windowsill, where the morning sun touched it just right. Days turned into weeks, and Emily began building a rhythm. Oliver went to a local daycare while she worked full-time at the clinic. Her co-workers became friends. She even started attending evening workshops on parenting and financial planning. One night, as she sat balancing bills at the small table, Oliver fast asleep in the next room, she paused and whispered to herself, "We're okay. Not perfect. Not safe from the world. But okay." Keanu visited less now, but when he did, it was quiet, meaningful. Sometimes they had coffee. Sometimes he read to Oliver. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, just sat and existed in the calm they had fought for. "I think I'm finally starting to believe in good people again," Emily said during one visit. Keanu smiled softly. "That belief was always inside you. You just needed someone to remind you." She looked at him with a seriousness she hadn't shown before. "You were that someone." He looked down for a moment, then met her eyes. "So were you." One morning, Keanu brought her an envelope. "Open it later," he said. "Not now." She laughed. "Mysterious." "I try." That evening, after putting Oliver to bed, she sat down at the table and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A letter. "Emily. This isn't a goodbye. It's a celebration. Of you. Of Oliver. Of everything you've overcome. The next chapter is yours. I'll always be around when you need me, but you no longer need saving. You've already saved yourself. With respect and hope. Keanu." She folded the letter with trembling hands and held it to her chest. Outside, the stars blinked quietly, as if they knew. Emily stood on the balcony of her apartment, a chipped mug of coffee in her hands, watching Oliver toddle around with a plastic dump truck. The morning sun spilled over the railing, warming the tops of her bare arms. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't rushing anywhere. She wasn't afraid of what the day might bring. She was grounded. Whole, maybe not entirely, but healing. She had started journaling again. Not just to process pain, but to reflect. To document moments that once seemed impossible: a stable home, a steady job, a baby smiling in his sleep without coughing from cold air. One night, she wrote a line that surprised her. "Maybe I went through all of that so I could understand how to lift someone else." 2 months later, the director of the community center called her with a quiet offer. "There's a woman," she said. "New. Single mother. Scared. She's barely speaking." I thought maybe. Emily didn't even hesitate. "I'll come in tomorrow." She arrived with a warm scarf and a bag of gentle snacks. And she sat beside the woman, not with advice, not with pity, but with presence. "I've been where you are," she whispered. "You don't have to talk. I'll just sit with you for a bit." The woman didn't respond. But she didn't walk away either. That was a beginning. Keanu heard about it later, not from Emily, but from the center's director. He wasn't surprised. "She has something rare," the director said. "Compassion that doesn't talk down. It just meets people where they are." Keanu smiled. She always had it. She just needed a safe place to use it. That weekend, Keanu stopped by Emily's apartment with a small gift, a hardcover journal with a golden ribbon tied around it. On the first page, he had written, "For the stories you'll help write that aren't yours, but will carry your fingerprints." She looked at him, moved. "This is beautiful." "So is what you're doing," he said. As days turned into weeks, Emily began visiting the center more regularly, not as a guest, but as a quiet mentor. She helped mothers fill out job applications, offered gentle advice on calming babies at night, and held hands when words were too hard. She never told anyone the full story. She didn't need to. Her eyes, her steadiness, and her calm said enough. One day, while sitting with a young woman whose son wouldn't stop crying, Emily handed over the small red ball Oliver had once loved so much. "This helped my boy," she said. "Maybe it'll help yours too." The baby stopped crying. Just like that. The mother cried instead. Oliver was growing fast, curious, clever, always tugging at things and making Emily laugh at moments she least expected it. He had a new favorite word, again. Whenever she spun him in circles or read his favorite book or made that silly duck voice, he'd shout it with joy. Again. Each time, she did it again. Because she could. Because there was joy in repetition now. In safety. In knowing the next moment wouldn't be a cliff. Emily saved up enough to buy a second-hand laptop. It wasn't much, but it worked. And late at night, after Oliver was asleep, she started writing. Not a book. Not a blog. Just stories. Some were hers. Some were made up. All of them were about people finding light in impossible places. She didn't know what she'd do with them. She just knew they mattered. One afternoon, she and Keanu sat in a quiet corner of the park. Oliver was asleep on her lap. "I think I want to go back to school one day," she said suddenly. Keanu looked over, eyes warm. "For what?" "Counseling. Maybe social work. I don't know. I want to help people full-time. The way someone helped me." Keanu didn't reply at first. He just looked at her. And then, he said, "You'd be incredible." She smiled. A soft, real, earned smile. That evening, she opened her journal and wrote. Some stories start in silence, and some in screaming. Mine started in a parking lot, with cold air and a stranger who didn't turn away. But that's not where it ends. Autumn arrived with its own kind of peace, amber leaves gathering at the edges of sidewalks, soft wind brushing through Emily's open windows, and warm clothes folded neatly in a second-hand dresser. Emily had settled. Not in the way that meant giving up, but in the way that meant she had arrived somewhere she could breathe. Each morning started with the same ritual, a bowl of cereal for Oliver, his tiny feet padding on the cold floor, and the sound of the kettle whistling while sunlight spilled into the kitchen. It was quiet. It was slow. It was beautiful. At the clinic, her role had grown. She wasn't just a receptionist anymore. She had become the person people gravitated toward when they were scared. She was calm when others weren't. And when new mothers walked in, tired, overwhelmed, half-broken, she saw herself in all of them. So she did what Keanu had done for her. She sat with them. Asked the gentle questions. Offered them warm towels, tissues, silence. "You're doing better than you think," she'd say. Sometimes, that was enough to keep someone going for one more day. One afternoon, Emily hosted her first support circle at the community center. It wasn't big, 5 chairs in a circle, a pot of chamomile tea, and a whiteboard with nothing written on it. When the women sat down, Emily didn't open with a speech. She just said, "Let's talk about what it's like to feel invisible." A few heads dropped. A few lips trembled. By the end of that hour, every voice had spoken. Some through tears. Some in whispers. Some with laughter they hadn't used in weeks. Afterward, as they stood packing up cups and folding chairs, one woman asked, "Did you take some class to know how to do that?" Emily smiled softly. "No. I just lived it." That weekend, Keanu came by for coffee. Oliver ran up to him, squealing with joy, wrapping his arms around Keanu's legs like a reunion with an old friend. "He's getting big," Keanu said, lifting the boy easily into his arms. Emily nodded. "And bossy." Keanu grinned. "He gets that from you." She rolled her eyes, but the warmth between them was unspoken and deep. As they sipped coffee on the balcony, Emily told Keanu about the support circle. He listened quietly. "That's incredible," he said. I want to give what I didn't have when I was drowning." "You're doing exactly that," Keanu replied. "You're turning survival into purpose." She nodded, her voice quiet. "And I think I needed to survive not just for me, but for this." They looked out at the horizon, where the sky bled gold and rust into the edge of the day. One evening, Emily found a letter in her mailbox. No stamp. No name. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, just a single sentence. "You were never invisible. You were just waiting to be seen." She knew the handwriting. She smiled, folded it neatly, and tucked it into the first page of her journal. As Oliver's second birthday approached, Emily decided to host a small gathering at the park. Nothing fancy, juice boxes, cupcakes, a blanket on the grass. But to her, it was monumental. 2 years ago, she hadn't known if she'd make it through the next week. Now, she was planning a birthday. Keanu arrived just as the first cupcake was being unwrapped. He brought a simple gift, a picture book about kindness and a tiny stuffed lion. Emily watched as Oliver sat in his lap, thumbing through the pages with wide eyes. She walked over, sat beside them, and whispered, "Thank you for everything." Keanu looked at her, his tone sincere. "You don't have to thank me anymore. I didn't fix you. You did that." She nodded slowly. "I know. But I still want to say it." Later, after the guests left and the sun began to dip, Keanu helped clean up the last of the paper plates and juice cartons. As he stood to leave, Emily handed him a small envelope. He raised an eyebrow. "Open it later," she said, smiling. At home, Keanu sat in his quiet living room and opened it. Inside, a photo of Emily and Oliver, standing under a tree, smiling at the camera. Tucked behind it was a note in her handwriting. "You saw us when no one else did. You changed our lives. Now it's my turn to do the same for someone else. Because of you, I believe in beginnings." Keanu stared at the photo for a long time, his eyes wet with the kind of tears that didn't come from sadness, but from something far deeper, a sense that he had been part of something real. Something lasting. Something that mattered. The years passed gently, like ripples across a still lake. Emily never forgot the cold nights in the parking lot, the fogged-up windows, the sound of her own heartbeat echoing in the silence. But those memories no longer haunted her. They reminded her of how far she had come, how far Oliver had come. Because the past wasn't a chain anymore. It was a foundation. She had built something. Something solid. Oliver was now in kindergarten. He had his father's eyes and his mother's quiet strength. His teachers said he was thoughtful, the kind of kid who shared his snacks and always noticed when someone was sad. One morning, when Emily dropped him off, he looked back at her and said, "Mama, I helped Ava today. She was crying, so I gave her my crayons." Emily smiled through sudden tears. "That's a beautiful thing to do, baby." He paused, thoughtful. "Is that what being strong means?" She knelt and kissed his forehead. Exactly. At the clinic, Emily had taken on a new role. She now led a formal outreach program, helping women find emergency shelter, connecting young parents with community aid, teaching a weekly workshop on emotional resilience. People listened to her. Not because she was loud, but because her voice carried truth. And they could feel it. One morning, while preparing handouts in the small break room, Emily received an unexpected call. It was from a shelter in another city. A woman there had heard about Emily's work, her calm presence, her story, her methods, and was inviting her to speak at their annual event. "Just share what you've lived," the woman on the phone said. "That's what we need more of." Emily accepted. Nervous, yes. But ready. That evening, she sat on her small balcony, looking at the city lights. She hadn't spoken to Keanu in a while, not out of distance, but because sometimes, when healing happens, presence no longer needs to be constant. But still, she picked up her phone and sent a message. "They want me to speak, Keanu. About what I've lived. About what we've lived. I'm scared. But I want to say yes." He replied a few minutes later. "Say yes. You're not just telling your story. You're giving someone else permission to survive theirs." Her hands shook as she read it. But her heart felt steady. The night of the event arrived. Emily stood behind the stage, her palms damp, her breath shallow. In her hand, she clutched a small note, not her speech, but something she had written to herself years ago. "You're not alone. We're in this together." When her name was called, she walked out slowly under soft lighting. The crowd was quiet. Waiting. She stood at the podium, heart pounding. Then she began. "I used to live in a car," she said. "With my baby. In a grocery store parking lot." There was a pause. Not of judgment, but of reverence. She continued, her voice calm but clear. "I didn't think anyone saw me. I didn't believe anyone would ever care. Until one night, someone did." And with that, she told the story. Not of tragedy, but of grace. Of how one act of kindness, not grand, not loud, had planted the seed of change. And how that seed had become a forest. After the event, people lined up to thank her. Some hugged her. Some cried. One woman pressed a folded note into her hand. Later that night, in her hotel room, Emily opened it. "Because of you, I didn't give up this week. Thank you for speaking. For surviving. For being brave first." She held the note to her chest and cried. When she returned home, she found a package waiting at her door. No return address. Inside was a hardcover journal, much like the one Keanu had given her years ago. But this one was filled. Not by her, but by others. Page after page, handwritten entries from women and men who had heard her speak, who had come to her workshops, who had been touched by her presence. Each story started the same way. "Because someone saw me." At the end of the book was a photo, her, Oliver, and Keanu, taken years ago at the park. And beneath it, in Keanu's handwriting. You didn't just change a life, Emily. You lit a path. And now, they're walking it. Emily sat on her bed, clutching the book, overwhelmed. Not by pain, but by joy. By purpose. She looked at the photo and whispered, "Thank you." Then she turned to the last page of her own journal and wrote, "This began in a parking lot. Not with noise. Not with glory. Just with a man who didn't turn away. And because he stayed, I found myself again. And now, I stay. For others. Because love, when quiet, is still powerful. Because kindness doesn't echo, it roots. And grows." In another part of the city, Keanu Reeves stood backstage at a film event. Flashbulbs exploded beyond the curtain. Assistants spoke in hurried whispers. But he wasn't listening. He held his phone in his hand, rereading Emily's final message. "He's growing so fast. I wish you could have seen him today. He asked me what a hero was. I said, someone who shows up." Keanu smiled and stepped into the lights.